It's kind of hard to know where to start telling you what to do about a lathe, because one of the first things you need to do is just get out there and just play with it. Make some cuts, ruin some pieces of wood, start with some scrap wood, play with it, see what happens. You'll get the hang for it after a while. So it's one of those things where once you know the basic safety steps, you just kind of get up here with your knife and you start cutting things, whatever things you want to cut. But after that, you need to start learning more about what each specific tool does, because they are shaped differently, obviously, for a reason. So now let's look at some of these tools in action, and you can see what happens on this exact piece. So here's the parting tool. If it gets too far down there, it'll pinch too much, and it's going to cause it to get hot. That's why it turns black here. So we're going to cut a little bit to the side, make our part a little bit wider. And we can go all the way down until this cuts in two, but you have to be careful doing that because this piece can just kind of flop out of here and hit somebody. This is one of my favorite tools. This is a small skew. You can use this both ways. You can use it like this to cut, or you can use it like this, kind of like a skew but sideways, to cut down a sharp point. So if you're doing detail work, like working on chess pieces, for example, you need to use this little point a lot to cut little notches in it. Of course, the larger skew you saw yesterday, the huge skew does not have much use on this kind of a project, but I'm going to show you anyway. You take it like this. And by scraping back and forth, you come up with a pretty smooth and basically flat edge. But because this is a cutting tool, and it's trying to cut the fibers, it may not do as good a job as a scraper would. So we can go back over that exact same edge with a scraper. The sharp edge is up here. See, it's beveled just a little bit, and as it's sharpened, it brings a little bit of an edge up here. So we hold it down like this. Usually you should have this a little bit farther back if using a scraper tool, but we're not going to do that here. And this will take off a very little bit of material to take off much finer. And they'll take it down to where it's ready to be sanded. This is a very aggressive fingernail gouge, because it comes out here kind of shaped like a fingernail. And it takes out a lot of material at once. One thing you need to remember about gouges, and this is a very important rule, is you always cut downhill. So on this spindle, this is uphill, and this is downhill because this is closer to the center of the axis of the spindle. If you cut from here, watch what happens. You shouldn't do this. You go up. See how it vibrates there? Sometimes it can chatter out of your hand. Especially if you're digging a deep hole like this, you can kind of grab it and it kind of jumps sideways like that. See that? That means you're losing control, and that's a bad thing. So rather than doing that, you always start at the top and push your way down. You start at the other top and push your way down. If you work your way back up, it grabs it and takes it out of your hand and you can't control it. That's because it's catching the side, this little corner over here, and once it catches the side, it grabs it and it pulls a little bit, and that's a bad thing. You start up here and you push down, you're always working into the cut, and so it never grabs it. Now that same cut, here's the bullnose scraper. We're going to just go right back and do the same thing. With the bullnose scraper, you use a lot less pressure. Your goal is just to push down in there and just kind of let it cut the little fibers out of there and make it a lot smoother. So if you're doing detail work, you don't want to use the gouge because the gouge is kind of a rough tool and it'll kind of mess up what you're working on if you're not careful. So once you get close, then you switch to the scraper and you get down here and just kind of take just a little bit off. You can take a very small amount off to make something look more round or whatever it is you're going for. This kind of scraper is sharpened on the edge. This is designed primarily for working on bowls, for doing the inside edge of a bowl. But you can use it on basically anything. And the cutting edge is all the way around this corner here. And so you can follow a curve very easily, sometimes easier than you can follow with the other kind. And you can get into tighter corners than you can with the other one. And this is a small gouge. Notice how I'm always going downhill. I never come back up like this. Always go down. So I primarily got into this because I wanted to make chess pieces. And so a lot of my work has been very detailed. But some of my favorite tools are these made out of carbide. See these heads? These are rotatable, which means that when this gets dull, which takes a long time, you can rotate it and then it'll be really sharp again. And you can get at least 4 rotations out of one of these pieces. It does the exact same thing, but watch. I'm putting a lot less pressure on it, and it does a really nice cut. As good a cut as a scraper does. So I don't have to use the gouge and then the scraper. They can both be replaced with this one tool. Now, these have an angle on the end of them, so basically you have to hold these out level. And the bevel just goes in there and cuts. It's a very nice tool to work with. And they come in a variety of sizes and shapes. Here's a square-headed one, which basically replaces a skew. You can use it like this, or you can use it like this. You want to be careful holding a lathe tool at a corner like this because it can grab it and twist it. You don't have the leverage to hold it at this angle. At this angle you have a great deal of leverage because you're holding right here and the tool's over there. So even though this is like maybe an inch, you have like 15 inches back here, which gives you a 1 to 15 ratio, which means that whatever power is exerted right here is 15 times less back here. Which basically means you're secure. If you turn it like this, it can very easily grab it and twist it, a lot easier than it can grab it and pull it down. Now this is a larger set of the same carbide cutter heads. And you can see these have a flat top, so you don't have the angled edge. So you just push this in there, basically like you use a scraper tool, and cut like that. But because these are set a little higher on the tool than on the bottom, whereas with the regular cutting tool, you're cutting off of a lot closer to the rest. Here you're cutting a lot higher from the rest. The rest should be adjusted down before you use this kind of a tool. So we need to turn the machine off. Lower the rest so that this hits basically dead center with your axis, and turn back on. And you can see this piece of wood I used has a lot of defects in it. And that's another mark of a good tool, is that it'll cut through the knots and through things like that and still do a pretty good job. Okay. So now that it's at a lower angle, I can hit this a little better. So this cutter head, like I said, the beauty of it is it stays very sharp. And as long as you're cutting with a sharp tool, it cuts very fast and cuts very clean and saves you time sanding later. And here's a different kind. This basically replaces your skew again. And then another flat-headed kind. But for just general wear and for cutting things off, I like using this tool. Because it cuts coves very well. And finally, they make sets of tools that are very, very small. And these are all the same tools you just met. From the left, you have the skew, you have the gouge, you have the parting tool, the round bullnose scraper, and you have the larger gouge. And these tools are the same tool, but they're just designed to be done with more detail. So if you're working on pens, for example, or fine chess pieces or things like that, this is the kind of tools that you're going to want to work with. This all works exactly the same. You just have to be more careful with them. Because they're smaller, they can't take the amount of force. They're designed for detail work, not for rough work. If you want to do the rough work with something else, and just bring these in for the finish, because this is just a very small piece of metal here. It can easily bend. So that's basically how you use these different tools and what they're more or less for. I wasn't really trying to make a pattern here. I'm just showing you what you can do. So when you start out, you're probably going to get the cheapest set you can buy. If you go to Harbor Freight, that's going to be the cheapest set you can buy, and they really are cheap in every sense of the word. I broke mine within the first day. So I really wouldn't recommend the Harbor Freight tools because they really are trash. So your better quality tools are going to be made out of something that's got a higher quality steel. There's a lot of old Craftsman tools laying around that are antiques now, but they are a very good quality tool. The top of the line is generally considered to be Robert Sorby, which is these really pretty ones here. I happen to get a discount on these because I got them from somebody who was getting out of the business. But nonetheless, they are awesome tools, but they're really expensive. The best tools I've found is a combination of some of this kind of tool and these carbide tools. Because these tools, lathe tools require a lot of sharpening because the lathe spins at a high speed. It cuts a lot of stuff very fast. What that means is heat. Heat hurts metal. It makes it soft. When it gets soft, it wears down. So you may have a sharp edge now, but 10 minutes later, you've got to go back to the sharpener and make it sharp again. Sharpening is something you're not going to be able to get away from, probably, because there are some things that a regular high-speed steel tool can do that you just can't get out of a carbide piece. But a lot of my work is done with carbide, and then just some of the detailed stuff or some of the rough stuff, ironically, I do with the steel. For example, my typical day when I'm working on a piece is I start with this tool, the one I made. This is an old file, and I don't care about it, so I go back and I sharpen it all the time. It gets a little bit shorter, but I've been using this for months, and it's only like an inch shorter. So the key to sharpening is to take a little bit off every time and to sharpen before it gets really dull, so you have to take a lot off to sharpen it. And we'll have a whole video devoted to how to sharpen one of these days. Meanwhile, I start with that, and then I'll shift down into this tool, the one at the angled end, and I'll use that to remove a lot of stock. And I'll use various sizes depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes I'll still use a gouge. If this isn't going quite fast enough, I'll switch to one of the medium-sized gouges, like this one, to remove some more stock, because gouges are really good at removing stock, sometimes better than carbide. But carbide removes stock neatly, and gouges don't. Because this is so sharp, when this turns against here, it cuts a better cut than the gouge does. And so once it gets dull, we just rotate this, and when it's all dull, we just replace this little carbide head, which is not too expensive. So I'll do that, and then once I get those done, I might use one of these smaller tools like my small skew here to get into a place where I just can't get the right angle on a carbide piece to do some detail work. And then I'll switch to sanding, and then it's done. So that's typically what I do. I don't use 90% of these tools. But if you're going to start out, I would not go with Harbor Freight ones. If there's any way you can afford anything better, go with the Craftsman kind here, or just go with the carbide tools. You don't really need that many tools to start out. You need something that will approximate a skew, something that will approximate a gouge, and something to sand with. You only really need the 2 tools. But if you're going to go with a third one, you should have a scraper tool. And the carbide pretty well subs for a scraper tool as well. I've worked with a guy for about a year now who is making his own tools here in the US, and he's going to start selling them here, and they're going to be available on my website so you can buy direct. They're American made, they're very good quality, and they're a lot cheaper than what you can get anywhere else. And I've been using them now for a year, and they're really nice. Because, like I said, the beauty of it is you don't spend a lot of your time sharpening. If you have to do anything, you just loosen the screw, twist, tighten, and you're done. And then every month or two, you might have to replace the head depending on how much you cut it. But we're talking about $4 or $5 every couple of months, and that's if you use it a lot, as I do. So start with the, whatever you can get something in your shop, use it, play with it, learn about it, and then you can just go ahead and get a carbide tool. And the ones that I have on my website are a very affordable tool, and I don't think you'll find a better deal anywhere.